Our next storyteller hasn't always been, but was originally, and is currently, a Cincinnatian. He is also an artist, an activist, and sometimes misfit Muppet, in his words, when he assumes his onstage drag persona, Sparkle Lee. Awesome. He is the caretaker of Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church, the chair of PFLAG Cincinnati. PFLAG, by the way, being the first and largest organization for LGBTQ plus people, their families, their friends, their parents, and allies. And the co-founder of Treehouse Cincinnati, which to say it supports the greater Cincinnati LGBTQ plus community and all of its intersections is just skimming the surface of what all they do. Keep an eye out for them. They are growing and going to be very great for this city, I think. He is also a proud uncle to some incredible humans he doesn't get to see enough. His story comes with a bit of a trigger warning. It involves a hit-and-run accident, which was definitely intentional and very likely motivated by bigotry. Happened 5 years ago, and although he looks fabulous on the outside, he still suffers the ramifications of this, what he calls collision, on the inside, with things like memory loss and depression and acronyms with C in them, which stand for concussion. He wants you to know, however, that he is telling tonight's story from a safe place, dropping a few F-bombs on the way. Please welcome Dan Davidson.
So something that I get asked to do very often these days as an entertainer, as a community builder, and as a sometimes educator is imagination exercises. Now this is mainly for Smurf-like people about ages 2.5 to 7. And as David was saying, I usually do this as my glitter tune drag persona, Sparkle Lee. And also, as David said, she's a little bit of like a lady Muppet, Miss Frizzle. And when I do these activities for the kids, it's mainly LGBTQ family programming and whatnot. It's a program called Storytime with Sparkle. And it's also just a great excuse to make my beard really glittery, which is especially helpful when you're working with Smurf-like people ages 2.5 to 7, because shiny. It's really good. So if you would, please join me. All journeys are honored, so please close your eyes or don't close your eyes, whatever you'd like to do. But I would like for you to pretend that you are being pulled out of an ambulance. And it is exactly like an episode of Grey's Anatomy. Only it's not like the episode of Grey's Anatomy where like the ambulance comes careening into the boarding thing and just crashes. It's just like a normal episode of Grey's Anatomy. And as you're being kind of wheeled off, there's a bunch of police and medical staff, not McSteamy yet, but everybody's kind of buzzing around. And suddenly you realize, oh my God, we're in Seattle. I'm being wheeled into literally Harborview Medical Center, which literally was what Grey's Anatomy was kind of based off of. And like, oh my God, what season, what episode, what's going on? And then you also think to yourself, or I'll go to first person now, I thought to myself, okay, somebody's got to break the mood, or, you know, everybody looks a little stressed out. So I'll be the charming, witty guy in the episode. And I basically try to say, hello, folks, the circus is here. Which doesn't really land well because I can barely move my jaw. My mouth is really bloody. And about a third of my teeth are missing. And also at this point, they basically had kind of wheeled me into the ER. And I'm like strapped on a gurney, neck brace, and everybody's buzzing around, and they're really concerned because I can kind of only feel the right side of my body. Left side still hasn't come back yet. And it was kind of at this moment where I remember basically it's not necessarily like this is the most painful thing that's ever happened. It is like You're being ushered into a Stranger Things upside-down world of hurt, is how I would describe this. If you or anybody that you know has ever suffered from a traumatic brain injury, there is no relief. There is no off button. Laying down, closing your eyes, very strong meds. You can do several things, but there's just kind of no relief because the injury is inside of your head. So I'm here in hell. And then suddenly, McSteamy. Only it wasn't actually McSteamy. This was my very studly friend Andy, who happened to be working in the trauma unit that night. And he was very concerned. He had come over because he thought he knew the drag clown that had just been brought in. And I will never forget Andy kind of peering over my gurney and just kind of saying, "Hey, buddy." And in that moment, it was just like the most charming thing that had ever happened, despite everything else. And even if I was going to forget it in 5 minutes, I was just very appreciative of that. And Seattle in 2017, we're in the midst of a very crazy like drag renaissance. So these are a lot of different performance venues that very, very, very vibrantly from my time at the College Conservatory of Music. I had stumbled into being on stages with Jinx Monsoon, with Ben de la Creme, Trixie Mattel, Latrice Royale, that Biatch Butch Alice. Lots of different crazy fun shows. And the night of the collision, I had asked my dear friend Becky to come to the show that I was hosting. It was called What the Fuck Wednesday. It was very aptly named that so that I could literally invite any performer friend of mine to come and perform whatever the fuck they wanted to perform. It could be puppets, it could be performance art, or this night, La Traviata. We were gonna be having 2 arias. It was gonna be fine. It was gonna be good. After the show, Becky and I were outside the club saying goodbye to everybody, and we turned and stopped at a crosswalk. And there were 2 cars that stopped for us. The one was a little bit closer, and the second one was a little bit further away. And as we walked in front of the first car, I believe that's when the driver of the second car saw my glittery makeup that I hadn't washed off yet. I was gonna do that kind of at home later on. But in that moment, he decided to hit the gas and aim the car at me. Luckily, my friend Becky was able to kind of get out of the way. She ended up kind of on the hood, just with her arms on the hood. She kind of swiped her knees a little bit. Unfortunately, the car hit me in my abdomen, which sent my head slamming into the windshield and shattering all of those teeth that I talked about earlier. Later on, I would have to have 5 major dental reconstructive surgeries that were about 2 to 3 hours each. And at that point, I do remember that there was a pause. This was like a hit and run, so that there was like the hit, and a lot of it is a little patchy, but I remember I could not see the guy's face, but I think in this moment he kind of looked over and realized that the first car that had stopped was an undercover police officer. At the intersection, there was actually another police officer that had just seen all of this happen. And then along the road, there were all the people that just got outside of the club and started screaming at the guy. So almost instantaneously, he hit the gas again. And I was still on the hood and kind of was like a Batman Indiana Jones for about 40 feet. That was my action career. Before I blacked out and I slid off the side of the hood. And when I slid off the side of the hood, being blacked out, I ended up slamming my head about 2 to 3 more times and kind of mangling my legs pretty badly. And I had to walk with a cane for about 9 months. Now, forgive my glitchy memory, I'm going to get a little piece of paper. I was eventually handed the TBI diagnosis, which is a traumatic brain injury, concussion, PCS, or post-concussive syndrome, complex PTSD, severe anxiety, optical nerve damage, chronic migraine, tinnitus, which is ear ringing and has never really gone away, wildly out of control emotional states, memory loss, TIA, transient ischemic attacks, or mini stroke, and wrestled with symptoms that were described as early onset dementia and Alzheimer's, and without downplaying the depression, suicidal thoughts, and the ever-present whiplash, which kind of accompanies not being able to really handle crowded rooms very well, especially ones with very loud music and like disco lights. So literally all of the venues that I was performing in. Eventually when I got out of the hospital, because I didn't have insurance, they kind of sent me away and were like, if you see these symptoms, you get back here, because that's not good. So for about 2 to 3 weeks, every few days, I was kind of in and out of the hospital. And at one point, there was a moment where my abdomen started to become a little bit like distended. And I went to the ER, and they were basically like, your body could be shutting down. Could you please wait? So I remember being freaked out, but yes, okay, and turned and politely had the choice between a very cold gray corner and like a chair with a potted plant, and I chose the potted plant. Through this whole thing, I feel like I've gained just a lot of patience and perspective, I'd say. And for however long I'm still here, I kind of came back to Cincinnati because this is where my body would have come back. Whether I would have actually wanted that or not. And I've kind of dug in here in the Midwest because it seemed like America was really changing. And it felt better to be kind of on the front lines here in the Midwest than formerly the now unsafe West Coast. So my nightmare is that I'm still recovering, and I might be for quite some time, but nearly all of what I'm navigating seems to be invisible, elusive, and kind of nebulous. It's a very post-concussive syndrome is a lot of what people call it. And what happened to the driver? So from what I've been able to gather through a background check, this person now lives in Florida and has 4 felonies. DUI, an HR pedestrian or bike felony, a refusal to stop, and a reckless endangerment charge. Now, I'm not sure if they are related actually to the incident R-Night, and definitely not sure if this was even technically classified as a hate crime. He actually was already involved with another aggravated assault in the midst of our hearing, so it kind of became very complex. So the thing that I would just like to encourage people is basically just to kind of talk to the LGBTQ people in your life and listen to them. Unfortunately, my story isn't actually that unique. I think that it's really, really important that people just know that what has happened to me is not okay. And every time that it's happened to me, it's not okay. When I survived conversion therapy here with Design and Intent Ministries, formerly known as Prodigal Ministries, it's not okay. The hundreds and thousands of trans people who are targeted nationally the last few years and have experienced violence, or have passed because of suicide. It's not okay. And an entire generation of people who are disproportionately queer identified, who survived an AIDS and HIV virus that there was no quarantine from. It's not okay. To everybody who is LGBTQ, friends and family, you are authentically seen, you are genuinely heard, and you are unconditionally loved. Thank you.